The other day they played the video of him saying, I'm not going to be one of those leaders who comes in and stays forever. You know, he's now done 34 years, he's about to do 40. Is there a sense that, you know, I'll come to you, Mr. But the thing about, you know, power, once you get into power, you kind of forget what it was you were fighting for all along?
Indeed, it's quite sad that, you know, after 56 years of nationhood, you know, we can only talk about three presidents. That is Sir Dawda, who was there for almost 30-something years. Jammeh came in 22 years, and now, you know, we're having the current president who has no intention of also relinquishing power anytime soon, from what we are saying. It's rather unfortunate. Like Sidi said, I mean, it seems immediately this thing was achieved, the independence was achieved, people tend to shift you know, their attention from the actual reason why they struggle for the independence to more of trying to entrench themselves on power, and that's exactly what we have seen since the Gambia gained independence. And then even with that, not much has changed. I mean, we've seen leaders come and spend years in power, but then what have they changed? Absolutely nothing, not much. I wouldn't say that won't change some, but then there's not much that we can, you know, celebrate as to some of the changes that have been brought by the previous leaders. As Sidi said, I mean, we still continue to rely on grants and loans. I mean, the Gambia's debt is still going high, and then you begin to wonder, how are we going to pay this thing? I mean, it's more like they're now leaving everything for the generation to come, and then it is something that is very unfortunate as a country that said it is independent. So for me, I mean, there's a lot that need to be done, and that's why it's an important day for the country to use it to reflect on, you know, where were we and then where are we heading to? Is there any prospect? Is there anything that we think, you know, is a good sign for this country?
Interesting you say that, and you know, every time I hear this from Gambians, I say that, you know, people in Cameroon will probably smile. They've been independent for 60 years and they've only had two. One was 22 years, the other has done 38 years already. So
it's a sickness.
I think it's a disease for sure. But Mr. Mbodj, I mean, you know, one of the things that I had kind of raised with Gambians and also with Sierra Leoneans, and I always use my parents' generation and my own as the comparison. My parents were of the generation that studied abroad with one intention, and that was to return home and rebuild their country. However, as politics became more and more dysfunctional, people of my generation, we studied abroad and we didn't come back. We didn't want to come back to the nonsense. We didn't want to have to put up with, you know, by the time I'd finished my university, Sierra Leone was a one-party state. It had been a democracy when I left, you know, so things like that. And my father had always, you know, imagine my father fought an election campaign in 1967 on the slogan, one party, we know one term. We don't want a one-party state. And yet it was his own party after a second election that had brought in the one-party state. So this thing we're talking about, you know, people come in and they forget the ideals that drove them. Because this happens so often, is it inevitable or can it be changed?
Oh, the romance of the romance of independence. I mean, this is what I meant earlier. You have this idealism, this rhetoric, these narratives, you know, rhetorical narratives, and then you have the reality. And so at independence, what was going on here? Because one must also put it in the wider context. Earlier on, you were talking about Edward Francis Small, but perhaps really to contextualize him as well, maybe the Manchester Conference was important, Pan-African Conference, because that was where they cooked it. That's where they cooked it. And of course, Edward Francis Small, you're absolutely correct, that he was this awakening spirit. Perhaps the political awakening of this country could be actually given to Edward Francis Small. So now from all of that, now you come into power. It's like being in opposition. I mean, just before independence, we could rally everybody. We were against this.
That's right. You had
now that you are in power, now it's not simply about I am against this. Well, I am for that. Now it's time to perform, to deliver. And suddenly we began to see, to understand ourselves. When we asked for independence, I'm not sure whether we truly understood ourselves.
Sure.
In many degrees. Let's look at this country, for instance. A lot of people will tell you, Sadauda, personally, he was reasonably incorruptible. He was decent and all of that. Yet the bureaucracy, the administration, you have ordinary people, us, running these things.
Sure.
But who are the people who have been corrupt? We are the ones who have been corrupt. It's a remarkable thing. I didn't know. Some people will say that as you as a society, you have a sort of feedback relationship with your leaders. Sure. They are from us. They reflect us. So before the state can be independent, I as an individual have to be independent first.
Sure.
I think it's a long journey.
Sure. Thanks for that. And again, I would urge and encourage my two fellow panelists on my right that if you do want to speak, Mandinka or Wolof, please let's bring in that audience by addressing them as well with this. But now we'll look at another video, which is again about the Independence Act 1964, which ends by saying on 18th of February the Gambia will become an independent nation. Let's have a look and a listen to this.
The time has now come for the Gambia to achieve full sovereign independence. In view of the added responsibilities which independence carries with it, and of which I'm sure you are keenly aware, I'm glad to know that you have recently made arrangements which will enable the Gambia, after independence, to work closely with Senegal on matters of defense and foreign affairs, and that you will be examining with the government of Senegal the possibility of cooperation in economic matters also.
That the Commonwealth has a vital role to play in a in a troubled world, and we will apply for membership in the Commonwealth Club. We know too that Britain and the other Commonwealth countries with whom we have historic and special ties will be foremost among the countries which will help us financially. We will continue to practice the democratic principles which you have bequeathed to us, and make the Gambia a shining example of democracy and stability.
Sadauda there, whose name has come up quite a lot, and again at Marlborough House there, and opposite him I see even somebody like Tony Wedgwood Ben was one of the people seated.
Mustafa Diba as well.
That's right.
I could see him
next to. And what's interesting about the Act was when it was being debated in the British Parliament, something was said. I remember as an African reading it, I thought, how insulting. Well, one of the MPs he wasn't exactly objecting to Gambia getting its independence, but he said, are there enough educated Gambians to take over the reins, to run the country, or is it just the educated elite who are pushing for this? And if so, how do we get the views of those who are not? But he was kind of pretty much shouted down by others, saying, no, it's not just an educated elite. The people of the Gambia want this. But if we're being brutally honest, did that MP have a point, CD?
Very well. That's why I said earlier. Right. Because at the time, you can see the educated elites, like I said earlier, wanted power.
Sure.
See, since Sadauda there, you can see a person with a vision. He seems to conceive something for the Gambia. Democracy, rule of law, be part of the bigger state,
sure,
the Commonwealth, and all those things. So you can see that in it.
Sure.
But what actually went wrong? This is where we need to find out.
Sure.
You know, why is it that all of a sudden the nationhood, was missing? And again, Mr. Drame, it's important also for us to take post-mortem of some of this, what just came up here. They're talking about independence in 1965. But then we had the governor sitting here in Government House for the Queen in 1965. And it was 24th of April 1970 when we had a republic. We took complete ownership. So I think this needs to be clear.
Indeed.
In as much as they claim it's independent, some students of history may say, no, I believe it's not actually independence. We may have self-governance. But we had the governor sitting here for the Queen. So it's important
and it wasn't just ceremonial, because as we were discussing yesterday, Mr. Mboji and I and some other colleagues, a court case could go all the way to the Supreme Court here and end up at the Privy Council.
That's right. That's right.
So how independent are you if a court can overrule what is the highest court in your own country? Ali, if I can come to you, mentioned there about the elite but the point about education. Successive governments, since I've been coming to the Gambia in 1992, I've heard them paying lip service to the importance of education. And if we look around the world, the countries that progress are the ones where education is not just talked about, but resources are put into it. Did that MP have a point about a few educated people pushing for this without making sure that all of the population are educated?
I think for me, going by that will have been a motivating factor for the subsequent governments, the presidents, to actually have invested more in the education sector. Like you said, a lot is said to have been spent on the education sector, but what we have seen here, especially the political class, most of them who tend to claim that government is very much committed to the education sector and is spending a lot of resources in the education sector, are not actually sending their kids to these public schools. They're all going to private schools. And in fact, most of them who will tell you, okay, we have one of the best public schools, we have the best university, you currently have their kids outside the country. Why aren't they at the University of the Gambia? Or why aren't they attending Latrikunda Upper Basic School? But they're all at private school because they think that's where they can get the quality education that their kids need. So for me, as you said, it's more like a lip service. What they do and what they say are quite contradictory in the sense that it shows that, yes, it's more of lip service. Not much has been spent as far as the education sector is concerned. And perhaps, that guy was somehow right that, we had just few, educated elites at the time. But now we're having so many graduates, where the mindset has changed is something, because it's one thing to go to university and back your degrees, but then if the mindset is not changed, it's another thing. That's why you have all these double masters, all that.
People letters after the names.
Exactly. So for me, like you said, it's more like lip services, and I think that man had a point at the time. But I think now we have so many graduates. Whether the mindset has changed is something that is debatable.
And whether they feel emboldened enough or they're fed up enough of the West to want to come back and be involved in the rebuilding. I think that's something we have to, I don't see enough of appealing to enough of those. There are brilliant Gambians working outside of the country while they're not here helping to build their own country into something great. And I think the greater effort has to be
that's
made.
also an issue. Like in the case of the Gambia, you have so many graduates living outside the country. Whether they're willing to come back and contribute to the development of the country is another thing. Like you said, I think it's really appealing for them. Will they really get that pay that they need? And also, will they be welcomed by those who are here? Because the problem is that most of these institutions, once you start having these graduates living abroad, coming back, in most cases, they are not really welcome. In the sense that, those who are here think, okay, they have come to take my position. And because of that, they are not really that much open up to welcome them.
Sure. And now if I could appeal to both of you, I keep saying this, but if we could, for local language, viewers and listeners who are not conversant with English, if you could say some of what we've discussed, and the whole about should we commemorating, should we celebrating, should we reflecting, and then over to you, Ali, after.
I'll do the Mandinka thing. I'll do the one for
Thank you very much, Mr. Ade. Mbokk ñi nga xam ne ngi seetaan QTV tey ñu ngeen amal li nga xam ne live panel fii si studio bi along Kairaba Avenue ñëpp xam nañ ne tey la Gambia di màggal seen independence gannaaw buñ dogee buumi jaam xam nañ tubaab bi ñoo fi nekkoon ay at yu bari di nekk in charge ci doxali raw mi ñu gis ne 18 February 1965 si la loolu jeex Gambia moom seen boppa tey nag loolu lañ nekk di màggal and liñ nekk di waxtaan moo nekk ne ndax Gambia am nañ seen independent ndax Gambia independent nation la ndax Gambia fu mu nekk ni ñoo yore seen affaire ndax lii dafa nekk loo xam ne war nañ koo màggal wala dafa nekk bés boo xam ne dañu war a toog ñu fàttali ko ñu jéem a xool dëkk bi fan lañ nekkoon ak fan lañ jublu ndax lu taxoon ñoom Sir Dawda Kairaba Jawara ñoom Edward Francis ñu xëy pour Gambia independent ndax loolu ñu ngi ko gis fu mu toll nii soo fu mu nekk loolu la ñu koy di waxtaanee bii si studio bi comme ni ngeen ko gisee woon si télé bi ñu ngay génne ay images ñoom Sir Dawda bi ñu demee London pour jéem a waxtaan yi fi independence Gambia bi ak loolu yëpp loolu la ñu koy discuss comme Mr. Ade ko waxee ñu ngi fi Sidi Cissé Mr. Mbouch ak Ade si boppam ak man Aliou Cissé so ñu ngi jéem a waxtaan and programme bi ni muy demee rek dinañ am suñu naataango Modou Lamine Thioye ak Aji Bintou Dramé ñun tam dinañ génn si mbedda bi pour waxtaan ak Gambian si naka lañ gisee bés bi tey so loolu lañ fi ne kay discuss tey.
And before I come to you, Sidi, I've just told we have Aji Bintou standing by, and thankfully you just mentioned her, and she's at Serekunda, and I hope we can go to her for a live feed. And for viewers who've just tuned in, that's part of what we'll be doing today, as well as the studio discussion. We'll be going to our reporters who are out on the streets, and Aji Bintou Dramé, I believe, is about to join us. Aji, are you there?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I don't think she's hearing me. So if I could come to you, Sidi. Okay, Aji Bintou, if you can hear me, speak to me, please. Can you hear me, Aji Bintou?
Mr. Mbouch, Mr. Cissé, albe programme min jibe kan walkata lundi mi alanko akuma yata pro Gambia dingol sa miro ke miro min be dende mbota dami be dami anim bitaka dami jama safo na bankola fansu to lungo ka jura fen na keta duniya don sabu la bije o sabo wala nyanda jibe la nintra lungo sita ko lungo min biko 18 February 1965 jama d'accord tako Gambia ya fansoto ñu lungo la par dama fana e sotaroje na fansoto to mine o sabo e ko tumo min nan alpha folol findita ka kachake pro kaje ko Gambia la fansoto nyi ka nyini molbul melu marlalti non min keda tubabolti angale tubabol ku folo mi ala nga keda kuma kan foloti nsafo wolon na fatiyati na fansoto la court wala no taxation without representation nkana namojo nimma mol sodo mol mi ala wolle ben tolo namo nyi malankun nan tole to momi no kedo kuma county wona dake na wala dati ka bulano ma fo wato nada soto Gambia dingo jama mile fahamo soto to babol la tamandiri nyal inate dadu wo kelo nyinto ka fuko pour Gambia fansoto Gambia lo fansoto dum kabring o keta animbi tema wala be jibeka jamala miro mominti sa fo fodo nyim fansoto nyum akeda kule me ay nafa wulu nyele bam fama nafa wulu nye wala mu kachade jam yalon kabe keka anim fanal be kibarol jela milbe finde kan television nyinto QTV ja membe den kibarol min keda non katol min keda non to momina alpha folol be kato ke kan ka Gambia dia fola anim fanan kibar talal min yalon ko wol fanan be QTV ja be bantola wol fanambe dunna ke dadu kachanyin kon bar min kum mayata wolon fo banko dingoli yela fond long ila banko kono o kum mayata bak parce que ka fo kare a fond soto on couleur mi la kum mayata bar fela fond soto nyi yenna fa soto je o fanan couleur mi la ka kum mayata bak.
Thank you, Sidi, thank you for that. And Aji Bintou, I gather you can hear me now, and all the technical issues have been ironed out. And can you hear me now? And I believe you have somebody willing to speak to QTV. and tell us about their reflections on Independence Day.
Abi
Bintu, over to you.
Yes. Okay, assalamu alaikum mbokki Gambia. Ñu ngi fi Serekunda tey ñu indi leen live independence the 56 independence ak QTV. So tey nag ñu ngi Serekunda pour ñu waxtaana mbokk yi luñ gis ci bés bi tey. So tey nag maa ngi soxna si mu ngi ma gis nii bu noo tudda
maa ngi tudd Salmatu Diallo Sukuta Neema.
So tey loo wax tey ci bés bi tey independence
bi jërëjëf kontaan na trop dabu Barrow boo nekkee Gambia fii kontaan na trop jërëjëf moom affaire bi te nga ma nekk trop moo nekkatu ba dëkk.
So léegi yow tey loo am pour ñaanal réew mi tey because tey la ñu celebrate seen independence.
yàlla moo dee ko jàmm waay yàlla bi yàlla talaata ba de yàlla tuwaaju maa ko léew bi moo continuer léew bi moo lépp gi continuer léew bi moo may ko nit yi loo lekka nit yi yëpp mu ngi am loo lekka sant yàlla man Barrow la ma ko waaye moom góorgóorlu moo may ko nit yi loo lekka sant yàlla moo toxa moo lekkat jëriñ xale yi ne moo lekkat lekkam xale yi moo yóbbu ko Gambia fii.
waaw baax na jërëjëf soxna si yaa jërëjëf soo léegi nag ñu doxantu si sëñ bi moom itamit mu wax xalaatam si bés yi tey salaamaaleykum sëñ yu noo tudd ak noo sant.
man mi ngi may wax Oustaz Mohamed Soxna waaw maa ngi.
foo jógee fii Gambia.
maa ngi Farato.
waaw. soo tey loo wax tey si bés bi tey.
kanaa di ko rafetlu rek kontaan si lool wax dëgg yàlla lii tamit xewal la ndax indépendance moom mooy ku moom sa bopp rek moom sa bopp nag dara jiitu si nga nekk nit ku baax bëgg sa réew bëgg sa lislaam damay wax ne indépendance yi réew yi am rakk la ci indépendance bu mag bi mooy islam ndax islam moo njëkk a goreel doomu aadama njaay kon indépendance yi yëpp rakk la ci indépendance bi la rek dafa ñëw dooleel ko may ko doole jàngale ci lislaam jàngale waale ci jikko bu rafet ak bëgg sa bopp bëgg sa réew dégg nga ko nangoo liggéey am yar ak teggin bañ a yàq liñ defar nii parce que indépendance yi bëri tey soo ko seetloo ba ci biir da ngaa gis ne ñoom maanaam dégguñ daal lan mooy indépendance parce que nit ki su fekkee ne dañ la may sa freedom boobu tekkiwul na yow da ngaa dem di yàqal li nga defaroon yëpp ci lu dem ci ay siècle da nga war a defaraat kay li nga fi fekkoon mu gën a avancé gën a développé waaye xale tey li si bëri si ñoom suñ meree rek génn si mbedde yi yàq loo xam ne defar nañ ko ci ay ati at loolu moo lay wane ne dégguñ seen maanaam indépendance bu baax a baax des na su ko defee ñu ngi ci occasion di woo xale yëpp di woo góor ak jigéen di ci ndokkeelaale suñu yaay yi tamit ndax ñoom i tamit liggéey nañ ci indépendance lu bare bari ñu ngi leen si ndokkeel di si ndokkeel suñuy baay di si ndokkeel suñuy kilifa diine yi ak kilifa aada yi mooy lu dalee ko ci Adama Barrow moom it ñu ngi koy ñaanalaale jàmm nag ndax moom su amee jàmm dëkk bi dañoo am jàmm su amul jàmm dëkk bi dañoo am jàmm de yéen yàlla may ko jàmm.
so léegi yow foo séntu Gambia in the next 10 years or 15 years.
ni ma gis muy doxee nii fi ma ko séntu am na yaakaar ndax li ma gis dal na suma xel lu ma doon xale doon naa xale duuma xale ndax 52 years kooku du xale waaye kooku tamit du mag gis naa Gambia mu ngee dem ndax li tax xale yi gis naa leen bëgg nañ lu baax gis nga yoon yu tukki yi ñu dee dem nii soo ko jàngatee ba si biir da nga leen mere waaye soo ko jàngatee ba si biir xam ne ay révolutionnaire lañ dañ bëgg lu baax seen réew mi lañ bëgg mu dem ci kanam soo kon xale yi ku leen dimbale fekk 10 years da ngaa gi réew bi danañ ko jëlee foo xam ne maanaam mooy danañ ko yóbbu foo xam ne mooy gën a kawe fi mu jógee loolu de yaakaar bu rëy la ci xale yi ba pare gisaan nañ beneen bunda mooy ne doomi réew mi nit ñu yar lañ ndax nit ku yar fu nga koy xamee nu muy fonkee gat damay wax ne réew yu bëri ñu ngi développé ñu ngi advance bëgg gan rek la man tukki naa man mii di wax yow dama tukki woon waaye réew yi ma tukki noonu bi ma demee xoolaat jàngat ma ne ñii li ñu rawee yeneen réew yi mooy gan yi bëgg gan kon réew mi tamit gis naa ne bokk na ci réew yi bëgg gan yooyu dinañ fi liggéey loo xam ne dañ koy bàyyi doomi réew mi rek kon yaatal gan bëgg gan loolu bokk na ci indépendance parce que réew boo xam ne amul indépendance gan du fa dem du óorut
soo léegi tey looy am pour ñaanal bis Gambia bi tey yan ñaan nga am
li ma am pour ñaanal leen mooy yal na yàlla maye fi jàmm feebar bii nga xam ne ñu ngi koy laam-laamee yal na yàlla jeexal ko ñun ñëpp ñu dund ci jàmm ndax jàmm rek dañuy wax ne mag ñi dañuy wax ne jàmm ak jaamu ñoo ànd jàmm ak jaamu soo amul jaamu doo mën a jaamu yàlla ñoom ñaaray séex lañ su kenn ki demee keneen ki daf koy topp kon yéen ñi la may jàmm suñu amee jàmm nga gis ne liñ bëgg ñun ñii ñëpp danañ ko am mooy avance rek mooy ñu am yokkute lii daal lañ mu am luñ see yokk soxna si
sëñ gi wax na ko te jaama moom mooy lu am solo sa kàddu yi rafet na jërë ngeen jëf soo dañoo bàyyaat ñu dema si studio bi after ñu waxtaanaa yéen jërë ngeen jëf.
Okay, Ajibetu, thank you there. And that gentleman sounds like he should have been on the panel. Mr. Mboj, before we went there, and just to say to the viewers that we will be going out to my colleague Ajibintu Drame and also Maud Lamin Choi, who is at another point, and we'll be getting the views of members of the public. And apologies for the slight technical hitch there before we had pictures there to go with the sound. But yes, again, we've used the sort of on the screen there we said reflections of independence, and I guess that was pretty much what we had and what we had there, Mr. Mboj. And really, if we go back to the central point of why we're here, why we're discussing this, it's fine to reflect, but in our reflections, what should we be aiming for? Ajibintu kind of posted there about 10-15 years hence. What should we be looking for? What should we be thinking of for the Gambia?
That's exactly it. That will depend on what you think that has gone wrong. It will obviously depend on that. And so far, when you look at our societies today, I mean, obviously the 22 years, what happened, and then we've just made this transition. But a lot of things sort of happened.
Sure.
There was a certain dismembering of so much. The civil service, the bureaucracy, that really the First Republic did so much to build. That was one of Jawara's strategies, knowing that you don't have much. So he cultivated the internationalism, but also made sure that we had a good, solid bureaucracy. He called it the indigenization of the bureaucracy. Right. And the education bit, very, very important. Not many people were graduates, very, very few. And that was really quite alarming. I mean, when we take, for instance, Zambia, Kenneth Kaunda, he complained about that. He said that independence, it was 64, wasn't it, a year before we had ours?
That's right. Yeah.
There were 99 graduates. Yeah. Only 2 of them were supported by British scholarships. Everything else was by the missionaries. Yeah. Just to show you the poor state of things that the Brits left the societies. Yeah. So that was it. Everything didn't have much. Everything was always going to be very slow. But again, you get impatient.
And you made a very valid point there, and we'll come back to it after we take this quick break. And the point is about it's a criticism that's been leveled at the Brits a lot, is that they actually deliberately made sure that their colonies and the places they ruled were undereducated, so that they would always stay in charge. And when we come back, we can address that point. But we'll take a quick commercial break, and we'll be addressing that point when we come back.
How to buy Q-Power from your Q-Money account. Dial *323# to access the Q-Money menu. Enter 3 to select Q-Power. Enter 1 to select Buy Q-Power. Select the desired cash power meter and enter amount you wish to buy. Enter your secret PIN and confirm purchase details. You will receive a confirmation SMS with your Cash Power token and order details. For more information, call customer care on 133. Q Money Sunyu Kalpe. We innovate, others follow.
Welcome back, and you're watching QTV, and you're watching our very, very important Independence Day special. I have here in the studio three people and on this four-person panel. To my extreme right, I have Aliou Cissé of QTV. Aliou, once again, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Ade. I
have to my immediate right Sidi, who again, this set and this studio, Kacha Abdullah, who'll be familiar. And to my left, my colleague Moden Burge, who I sometimes used to join on a program called Drive Time, and of course who hosts The Viewpoint. And we're talking about independence, and we're reflecting on independence, and we've had a lot of views, divergent views, interesting views, I think you'll agree. And we also went out and we spoke to my colleague Aji Bintu Drame, who spoke to somebody at Serekunda. We'll be going out later to speak to another colleague of mine, Babukar Cissé, who's also out with a crew, and we're speaking to people out in the streets. And it's part of the reflections. We've been playing a series of videos, or we recorded a series of videos of people who remember the day, 18th of February 1965. This next person should be familiar to many Gambians, and should be very familiar if you watch parliamentary proceedings. Have a look at this.
I remember then we were probably at primary school, Windy Primary School. We went to the Makati Square. Prior to that, I think it used to be the Empire Day celebrations, and as school children, of course, at that young age, we used to be very thrilled with our new uniforms, and our very smart hairdos, not these long hairs. We used to do what we call later. Very decent with our new shoes and socks and uniforms, and very well organized it used to be. We would, I can't remember whether we used to assemble at the schools or somewhere near the vicinity of the Makati Square, but sharply timed, every school, I think, used to be allocated from a few police officers who would guide them at the time to walk into the Makati Square to take positions. And then the officials, government officials would come in with members of the discipline forces and other voluntary organizations to take part. We used to look forward to it a lot, and we used to be very thrilled, marching with our teachers leading us, and then after the march we would stand and then would sing the national anthem for the Gambia. And there was then this other local song, Ligay Jotna. Now I remember, yes, Ligay Jotna. We used to sing it, and then we would then disperse, go back to our various homes, I think, to get prepared for the afternoon sports that used to take part. I wasn't a very good sports person. We used to watch and cheer, but then we'd be very happy with whoever used to win, and we'll applaud them and clap for our own teams as well. That's the little I can remember.
Of course, there you heard the Speaker of the National Assembly, Mariam Jack Denton, who remembers as a young girl. Mr. Mbodj, other than myself, I think you're next in age. And so if I could come to you, really for your personal reflections before we address the point I was mentioning about the British and the education system in their former colonies. I'm assuming you also took part in that.
Absolutely, similar experiences there, of course. The new uniforms, going to the march past, the pride.
Do you as well?
Yes, there was significance. It had significance,
right.
And the parents took it seriously. They'll do all sorts of things to get you new uniforms, and then of course the sports. In the afternoon, sports today, fantastic, absolutely. The memory, it was just yesterday.
Okay, and for both of you, do you also have memories of it, or had it faded by the time you?
I think for me, I only took part one.
Okay, right.
I only took part one because it was too hectic for me.
Right.
And I was living in Bruford, so we had to go through a lot of struggle to get to this side. When I did it once, I was very lazy as a student. I must say. So I just thought, no, I just can't be doing this anymore.
Yeah, quite. And for you, Aliu?
Well, unluckily for me, I'm a villager, so obviously most of us were in the village, so we weren't that much into independence, march past and all that.
But were you aware of it?
Yes, indeed. I was aware of it, but then it wasn't something that was really very much important to us as far as coming down to the coast for march past here and there.
Sure.
But then, like the speaker said, it was something that they were always looking forward to.
Sure.
It seems a lot have changed now, Mr. Mbodj. I mean, independence is no more as many will have saying in the past, having students so excited that Independence Day is coming, having their new uniforms and all that.
Sure.
A lot have changed, and then for her, I mean, it was something that they were always looking for, especially talking about the new song, Ligue Jotna Gambia Amna Bopam. It's now time to work. Gambia has gained independence. So a lot has changed now. I mean, I don't know for what reason, but then it seems a lot.
But I think part of the change was when it became militarized, which was not surprising when you had a military and a military-inspired government, that it went from being about the school children to be, as Mariam Jack said,
it's more like military parade. I mean, everything is overtaken by the military parade.
That's
so
right.
Instead of the students taking the lead, it's more like the armed and security forces will take the lead, and then the next is, you have the student who, in most cases, before they even might pass the president, the sun is always hot, and then it's always difficult for them. But I mean, it's an important day, as the speaker rightly mentioned there. But then, as you said, I mean, it shouldn't just be a day to reflect, but also what are you hoping to see in the coming, in the coming years? Like Ajit Pinto did ask that old man, what is he anticipating in the next 10, 15 years? I mean, it is also something that so many Gambians will be thinking about. Independence, 56 years of nationhood. What next now?
Sure.
Knowing what has passed and what has happened as far as this country is concerned, and where we are, what should be done? Like Mr. Mbodj said, where should we start is to identify what are the problems, and this will require having a very committed government and a firm leadership to make sure that that offer the change. And then, like the ST just said in one of his new songs, we don't just want pocket change, we want a real change.
Real change, exactly. Yes. And if I could come to you, Mr. Mbodj, and pick up on something that Sidi said right at the beginning, which was about the kind of the elites wanting power for themselves and so on. Once they had got that power, were they? I gather Ajit Pinto might have someone else for us who might be equally eloquent. Ajit Pinto, I gather you're about to join us with someone else. Please, over to you if you're there. my colleague Ajibintu Drame is she's really working. Luckily for her, this is a very overcast day. There's not a lot of sun. There's a Saharan dust haze across the country and across Senegal as well, and Guinea-Bissau, I'm told.
Right now,
and so it is shielding them from the sun. But Ajibintu, if you're there, and there she is. Ajibintu, please come in.
Ali Bitey.
Gambia.
Okay, I can.
Serekunda.
Yes, I think Ajibintu's at Serekunda.
I'm now going to tell her independent.
Yes, Ajibintu, over to you, please.
Celebrate Buba.
I think we're having some technical issues there, but we'll try and get back to her. But this is what happens when you have live broadcasts sometimes. Mr. Mboj, if I can come to you, the whole thing about I was saying CD made the point about the elites and so on, but the point I was making was that they flip it on its head by saying, yes, once they had taken this power, once they had fought for this independence, and they had surveyed the country and they had realized that, okay, we don't have a broad base of educated people, should they have done more to educate the public? Oh, my criticism is that some of them preferred not all of the country to be educated.
Yes, that's
am I being unfair?
Yes, some might say yes. Some might say, I don't know, maybe it's slightly cynical. You are absolutely correct. And for instance, when you take Zambia again, they built a university immediately.
Yeah, sure.
So, absolutely. So, perhaps in this country, one can make the judgment, how come we didn't prioritize it more? How come we didn't do this? How come we didn't do that? And we were told that some of our policies, for instance, there was a time when a child couldn't go to school until you were 8 or something like that, but afterwards they regretted that. Yeah. So, yes, a combination of not building enough capacity and perhaps having the wrong policies in place. Perhaps these are all factors that sort of contributed to what education is like today. Regarding the elites, what else could you have expected from the elites? Somebody said that sort of in the end, post-colonial Africa, two classes emerged, the educated and the uneducated. You see, the educated were the ones who would get all the government jobs and, running the show, as it were. So they became corrupt in the sense that they inherited the colonial state, but it never really was transformed. There was no revolution with our independence. No, a revolution didn't happen at all. Maybe reform, a simple reform. But there was no revolution at all, because it just continued the colonial state. What was the colonial state? It was there, to subjugate you better, to run things effectively so that you wouldn't get out of line and that sort of thing, and to enrich themselves. The extractive nature. It is still extractive. The rent collector, state capture, as they call it now. That's precisely it. We never really dismantled the colonial state. Then you have the colonial mentality is still around. That is why we are in this dire problems. Colonialism hasn't ended, really. So there must be the second round of independence, the second wave.
It's interesting because what Mr. Mboj just said there's a famous footage which people can find on YouTube of Amilcar Cabral when they were fighting for independence of Cape Verde and Guinea-Bissau. And the British interviewer asked him, why this obsession with building so many schools? Because in the areas that they had captured in Bissau and in Cape Verde, they had built more schools in 5 years than the Portuguese had built in 300 years of ruling those places. And he said something. He said, because these people keep using the excuse that the reason they don't want to give us independence is because we're not educated enough to take our affairs into our own hands, and that's why we must educate our people. Today, Cape Verde has 87.6% literacy rate. It's the highest in Africa, and they're our neighbors. But they went into it, and they believed in it. So my point again is, why did we not go with the same zeal? As I've said, is it my cynical view that some of these politicians preferred it that way?
I think they preferred it that way. Like Mr. Mboj have said, after independence, the colonial rule, it's a makeover. There were some makeover changes, whether it's cosmetic, I would call it.
Sure.
And the same thing continues.
Sure.
You see, you could say 20 years to independence in 1985, for example.
Yes.
We had the ERP, the Economic Recovery Program.
Yes.
That came. Okay, I think somebody's.
I'm told Ajibintu is ready, and this time she will speak to us. I heard that before, but she didn't. But Ajibintu, please speak to me and speak to our viewers. I gather you have somebody. Ajibintu.
mbokki Gambie comme nu ma ko doon waxee right now ñu ngi syndicat ñu dugg si bitiki tamit ñu waxtaan suñu mbokki Gambien bi sëñ ngi noo tudd ak noo sant.
waaw maa ngi tudd Ali Biteye. Ali Biteye Serekunda.
so tey xam nga ne tey la independence.
waaw xam naa ko bu baax.
so tey loo wax si bés bi tey.
waaw ñu ngi kontaan bu baax di dalal waa QTV ci bitik bi nga xam ne mooy Soppa Sëñ Habib Touré VIP Sanse noonu la bitik bi tudda ñu ngi nekk opposite kër Khalifa Sall Serekunda. waaw ñu ngi kontaan bu baax ci yàlla moom ñu may ñu fekkee independent bi di ñaan yàlla may ñu fekke ko ay at yu bari di jiital suñu nuyoo nag ci président bi di ko ñaanal yàlla jàmm bi ko bu amee jàmm rek ñun ñu am jàmm kon ñu ngi sant yàlla ci loolu di wax ne independent de fekkee nañ ci lu bari benn ci man maa ñaa independent bu bari 22 July time boobu buñu maajee dañu doon fay tànk ak ñetta boobu xale yu bari xamuñ ko léegi boobu yàgg na trop sant yàlla bu baax ñu ngi kontaan trop di ñaanal réew mi di ñaanal ñu fay eewoo ak ñu fi dëkk ñëpp jàmm di ñaan yàlla feebar bi nga xam ne moo lëmbee àdduna yàlla génnee ko fi ci barke independent buñ toll bi si tey bi ñu ngi ñaan yàlla di ñaanal ñëpp jàmm rek di ñaanal QTV di ñaanal ñi nga xam ne ñun ñoo nekk fii ci bitik bi di liggéey suñ boss muy Malick Gaye ñu ngi ko ñaanal wér gu yaram ak fan dégg moom tamit bu amee jàmm rek ñu am jàmm nit ñoo moom a nekk fii di jàppalante di kontaan bu baax rek ci independent bi.
so léegi yow foo seetu Gambia in the next 10 or 15 years to come.
waaw xam nañ ne incha allah ñu ngi ñaan yàlla yokkute rek bu ñu yàlla joxee njiit bi nga xam ne mooy Adama Barrow te gis nañ projet yi mu somba bu ñu yàlla mais loolu dem am nañ yaakaar ne next 10 years développement lu bari dina am yokkute dina am te incha allah dina am ñu ngi ñaan loolu pour yàlla defal ñu ko. bu ko bëgg nañ réew mi dox bu doxee rek ñun ñëpp dinañ dox waaye bu taxawee benn plan duñ dem soo ñu ngi ñaan yàlla mi nga xam ne mooy mais na def Gambia nekk ci kaw ca kaw loolu ñu ngi ko ñaan yàlla bu baax.
so yow si sa bitik bi di te xam naa ne after di nga tëj yow nooy dundee independence bi after.
waaw bu ma jaayee ba ci kanam rek damay tëj dem kër ga waaw joxe naa dépense bu doy pour ñu def ceeb bu baax a baax xale yëpp añ naan lu sedd kontaan xam ne tey mooy independent ñu célébrer ko. waaw loolu moom def nañ ko waaw.
waaw loolu moom am na solo gars yi yéen a ko dégga ceeb bu baax pour independence bi so ñu demaat back si studio bi Mr Ade after ñu indi leen more people ñu wax seen kaddu si bési independence bi.
And Ajibintu is doing a great job there, and she's finding some very interesting people to interview as well. Sidi, we caught you in full flow.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I hope it's not Ture Kundaka there talking about food. Yeah, coming back to the subject of what Mboj earlier said, the emancipation, the independence as it's claimed, why we did not build the education, the institutions. And not only that we did not build institutions like the university and colleges and stuff. We had only one college at the time, the Yindum College. But also the learning materials we had at the time, the curriculum, were actually not changed. We continue to educate, the Gambian people on the context of the colonial sort of thing. It's more of like, instead of revisiting, the curriculum, giving the students, giving the kids to understand where we were as a country, was not done. So what then, happened is we have the political bureaucracy, the political privilege happens. Because I used to remember as a child, when something was happening in our village, when the politicians comes, our mothers, our grandmothers, our grandfathers will all be dancing for them, praising them. Imagine you bring a tap, a street tap in one of the bantabas or such. I mean, and they will be praising you. They will be singing praises for you. And in fact, some will go at the back of their houses and bring bags of rice for you, bring all sorts of gifts, and you take it. So that's what continues, and this is what used to happen when the colonial powers were here.
Sure.
You know, so this is actually the issue. And when you talk about 20 years down after 1965, 1985, we had the worst economic downturn in the Gambia, where we have the ERP, the Economic Recovery Program. You know, so many people lost their jobs because of what? We did not manage properly.
Yeah, right.
And that's what seems to be continuing now. You know, we have a country that if you want to go to your house, I would spend another hour on the phone just to find your house. No street names.
Sure.
You know, no proper mapping. All these things are happening.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that we need to do. And I think the bottom line here is honesty and love for country.
Sure.
And that's what is missing.
Sure.
We had independent, we had republic, but we do not have honesty and love for country. Sure. Everybody seems to be there for themselves.
And it's interesting because I'm kind of smiling behind my mask because when we were talking about it, that was one of the points, and I was going to quote the famous John F. Kennedy, you know, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Should, Aliu, that be what we are asking of Gambians, as CD says? And if so, what do we want them to do? And where do we want them to get involved?
Well, as you said, quoting John Kennedy there, you know, don't ask what your country can do for you, but what can you do for your country. It's exactly the same mindset that everyone should have on a day like today,
sure.
A day like an Independence Day. Like Sidi said, I mean, a lot needs to be done. I mean, he talked about the issue of, you know, mapping, directing someone over the phone, and that takes my mind to your brilliant piece on the BBC website.
You know my thoughts on that.
Exactly. So, like Sidi said, I mean, in terms of, you know, the awareness is still not there. And then you're talking about perhaps political leaders want to preside over people who are not actually educated. Because in that you can easily manipulate them. And I think that is the tool that they have been using over the years, because, and it still exists. I mean, you still go to the provinces, for example. I mean, a president will bring you something, a development, and then for them it's more like he's doing you a favor.
Sure.
When actually that is the reason why he or she is voted into office. But like you said, it all boils down to the education sector, which is not giving that much attention. Like you said, I mean, they will come and claim that a lot of millions have been invested into the education sector. But then, I mean, there's nothing much to celebrate about, as you rightly mentioned. I mean, perhaps at the time, like CD said, at the time of the independence, I mean, the educated elites weren't that much, and one would have expected that would have really inspired from the PPP government, I mean, coming to APRC, and now a lot of, you know, improvement will have been done in the education sector, and certainly not only the education sector. I mean, for me, I think all these sectors really need due consideration. The health sector is one sector that is also out there, which actually is in a very poor state and needs, you know, total overhaul. And not only the health sector, even the agriculture sector. I mean, a lot of things needs to be done. As far as, you know, the country is concerned. But like you said, still, you know, that quote by John Kennedy is something that, you know, we should all adhere to.
Sure. And we mentioned education, and Mr. Mboj, I think you wanted to come in. And after Mr. Mboj's intervention, if I could ask my colleagues in the technical department to find the video of where we've spoken to students at UTG, and we hear some of the young people, what they think. And they're not all singing from the same hymn sheet, which I was quite pleased to see. There are some independent voices, but I think you wanted to come in there, Mr. Mboj.
Regarding this education thing, I mean, broadly, one is, of course, right. We didn't have enough. Perhaps we didn't invest into it, and it wasn't wide. We didn't cast the net widely enough. But I must also say that what was here, yes, yes, we will talk about elites leading the whole thing. But again, when I think of the people I was in class with, they were from all over.
Right.
You know, the children of the president and a watchman's watch people, you know, very ordinary people's children. Now you cannot see that here. Now it's all like apartheid, educational apartheid. It doesn't matter how brilliant you are, if you don't have any money, you're never going to go to a Marina or a CBEC. Whereas before it could capture brilliant people from elsewhere, and you could go to Gambia High School or St. Augustine's. I mean, it narrow, limited, admittedly, but again, it had depth. I would like to think. Today, it has been widened, but some might say that it's shallow.
Sure.
So
and you're right,
we
because
must be nuanced. We must be subtler in how we look at these things.
Yes, when I came here in the 90s, I was invited to go on television, and I wanted to, amongst other things, talk about the fact that if education was such an important thing, why was a country that had never been to war with anybody spending more on its army than it was on education? They said I wouldn't be allowed I wouldn't be allowed to say it. But I kind of left it hanging in the air, and I think really we laugh about it, but this is a serious point, isn't it? That we militarized not only Independence Day, but also we kind of weaponized a military that were never going to fight anybody, except they went on peacekeeping missions to places like Darfur and other, and yet we neglected. You'd go to schools where there were no labs, or you'd go to a school in the village where the guy who was the teacher had just finished secondary school or hadn't even finished secondary school. What is that person going to teach my child? So it's always building schools and so on. But yes, Sidi, I think you wanted to comment.
Yeah. We just saw 1964, the meeting at Marlborough House.
Yes.
When they talked about Gambia taking ownership, independence, as they claim. So you have to work with Senegal. Corporate, foreign service, military, whatever, security, and all these things. So it's there. We had something that we could work on with Senegal.
Sure.
And if that was done properly, I'm not saying just haphazardly. If it was done properly, we probably would not be in this stage with militarizing ourselves. Because, like you said, I think it was you who said a sandwich, for example, hot dog.
The hot dog.
Hot dog.
Yes, Gambia is the sausage.
We are surrounded by Senegal on almost all sides. So even the airspace, before you get to the Gambia, you must go into Senegal airspace. By land, I think somebody's coming.
Yes, and Babukar Cisse, my colleague Babukar Cisse, who we've been trying to get hold of, and I think he's also managed to get hold of some people that he can speak to. Babukar, please, in Brikama, come in, Babukar Cisse.
They call it Sateba as well.
Babukar in Brikama, are you there?
Yes, Adedrame, I can hear you loud and clear.
Good. And I gather you have somebody there who's willing to speak to us about their reflections on Independence Day.
Yes, Ade, thank you so much. I am here in Brikama today, and we all know it's a very important day in the history of our country. It is our 56th independent anniversary, and we are out and about to speak to people about what they think of this important event. Mbadingol komun ka fale jamin mfelenti mbi mbe Brikama le andung lunkuma balembi Gambia la tariko kono wala nyinti ko Gambia la fansoto kabotu babo la maraloto anin nyinante ma sanji tang lulu sanji woro waya sabu QTV mbale live Brikama sate kono purun ni mole diamu denengolu alfalu momo ye ko min sore ba fala purun nyil lungoto mi alonko lunkuma balem nata minna suwo kono jambi ay tariko long demanding ni independent wala karola katung mole mi alonko independent fango ya tara abe balorine andung amabe tanung makati square kudol fango kono le wato mina nyin kolbe kela e ka fole ba tombon jawara andung ala kumaya fango mi ya sabo president jawara mi alonko abe molle kono anin sirifu di bagnol anin père Ndiaye ñol kata sanjali boja mi alon ko fana mbora Brikama janne wol be mo kuma baleti bari ba to mon felente njam mi alon ko jawara dingolem so nabe kacala a français kumo fo mole bi lungoto ba to mbon mbe konton na bake bi lungola QTV natela so kono bi live dunia bebe jube kam pour se kuma fo mole independent wala kuoto yemil long independent auto bawo folo isa commencé bawo jawrabe molle kono mini alonko wolle nyin independent ko kele ani modolu fonga independent soto andu iteni jawra denta bakele ese kufono mole auto bang
Polo alhamdulillah rabbil alamina. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Alhamdulillah rabbil alamina. Be maso tentula me yenda ayen tujang fokana putambe bitilo mento atel ciuti bin kol fanal mbal be tentula mbal jayila kaballa man jara fokat yalla mo la bangala be ala tentula bake mbal fanal tentula misa sise alla nan kan na korda kono jang kan tar jang kabapita o katanya sewo bati anem bunya anen jawla kundabe kulam nyunti me yalon ko ye bunda mem matenga bunda kono fanuta bake folo mba kuma sila dame wala mtu ko Alhaji Sadauda Kairaba Jawara ala mane mane kafar kelay folo mfama lemu aninde fama wala bota fakilin bare mfala mu telefon be ko to kebati de fama lemu almame Jawara dim foloti musukunda ke kunda e ka faye kebande mu Jawara ala mane mone kafar kelay wala ente wulu wala ni Sadauda Kairaba Jawara Sadauda Kairaba Jawara nyolle ente kuluta wolle bulu anen Alhaji Sirifo Jawara tala alamane monen kafar kala nyille mum fama nyuluti meli alon kon tata wolle bulu jang woto kamala ninga alnatan kan suwo kono jang pour kana bi lumba ka kilimandi ka bunyandi family be tola menkete Jawara kunda woto katanye sewo ku balati anen bunya ba be banko mol be tentula be jayila na diamo jang amansu fenna na make Gambia bankoti o Gambia banko wala o bunya cika ya di Jawara kundala o Jawara kundala o bunya wala futa ndama bi pour kana ka diam Jawara kunda be tola na kontano ni na sewo folo yemen fote misa sise ita fa manke nyelonti ni nyolom bakele bawo ala yake nga nyolom bunda me yalon ko muslime ya bundala ti serun ko hijola nete belta nyola hijola itere kada na moti je me yalon ko rekordo kiji so to kamala yenyinin ka alifa ba men na ko wala Gambia bila alifa Alhaji Sadauda Kairaba Jawara independent la karola akara Kenya sifala ngado mandi lonjele bao Gambia bi mbetemmente bedamento nte kundion kata fo kata Gambia banko kan kata fo fula man kata fo wala Gambia banko kan kata fo folo men kata Gambia e banjul sado kono adanta wala to man kata fo wala anen kata me yalon kata ko afaita commotion meri man kata fo wot barna man ko Gambia kono kata fo kata fo be kata nyaale because nte wuluta 1970 tirile 1974 no 1947 okay 1947 I'm sorry I'll hear 1947 45 lonte wuluta 45 1945 so wote baje ko alhamdulillah nga fendin kala mta nyen kotole independent carte fola watola tariko lo me alon ka jamfata bake because election jamal le keta kono saroro na la molu election folo keta le gagner manke gagner men keta mantima kuma jama keta woto nen ko me bulo tariko ko na be jamfata bake bal men kumada fa kumada lungume yalo ko Gambia masa kundala banderobe wulla makas koya tuwa bolla banderobe jindira alhamdulillah rabbil alamin wolonti loto o wuraro ala yake mbejele akata nyala halikabi manyina jela lunke so lunglu kono wurla to ji ngakku kilinji je o fankata tare ko dolati musobi je adingo be bampuri nga koto birin Sadauda Kairaba Jawara Gambia plako wulita tuwa bola fulako jita wuro kumata lampol fata wodi bokono kirlo kumata muso men adingo be bampur nga kota busandita nderbe tembe damento adingo be bampur nga koto mollota kan fata dingo fata akoto alhamdulillah o mo ala kiti yoldi o kata nyala o kata tal ko te lungu me yalon ko Gambia kono jang anyon lung ate sotola Gambia kono kotek because tarkilo wote me yalon kadi ko Gambia le folota Gambia jang Alhaji Sadauda Kairaba Jawara la karola
batom bon me konto bare be murne kam follow be murna studio de follow Ade Drame, back to you in the studios.
Thank you. Thank you, Babakar. My colleague Babakar Sise there in Birkama, and again with somebody reminiscing, some quite sort of deep reminiscing. Now I mentioned earlier that we went to UTG and we spoke to some of the university students there. and we got quite divergent views. And I'm hoping at some point we'll line up the videos of that, and as we try and find that, come back to here. And so we did this vox pop. We went because we wanted some views. We'd already recorded some older people, and you've seen some of those videos already, but we wanted to hear from the younger generation, and we wanted to know what their thoughts were about independence and what it meant to them. So have a look at this and see what some of them had to say to QTV.
To start with, what independence means to me is to have a complete or total freedom from outside control or support. However, in my opinion, the Gambia has nothing to celebrate as far as independence is concerned, because going by my definition of what independence is, we are not totally free from outside control or even outside support. We are controlled until today by foreign countries and foreign bodies. We are equally being supported. We cannot sustain ourselves. And any country that cannot sustain yourself obviously cannot call yourself an independent state.
I think this Independence Day had to push us to contemplate more on the trajectory of how our developments are taken, or the road in which our developments are taken, in order to sustain or to provide sustainable development in future. When you looked at Africa today, more particularly Gambia, the population is increasing. We are heading towards, so many millions of people compared to the time that we are having independence, around 300,000. In next 20 years, we will be heading to 5 million. So right now we are talking about 2.3. So this Independence Day should be a day that we can sit and contemplate and see, a better future or better plan for our younger generations that are about to come.
Independence, as a Gambian, to me, it's the time we have liberated ourselves from British colony. It is important for us as a country to know that independence is not just about the word independence, but it's about detaching ourselves from this British colony. That is not relying on them when it comes to finances and socialism, not adopting their culture, but standing on our own to ensure that we have developed and push ourselves as a nation.
Independence means liberation, and it helps us to reflect on our past. Talking about colonialism, we gain freedom as citizens, and it also gives us a sense of belonging as Gambians, and it also shows us our rights as citizens.
I think the word independent itself, it's a very complex term. It depends on the angle you look at the term independent. To me, independence should be looked at in a diverse perspective, like economic independence, political independence, and social independence. When it comes to the side of political independence, I think we are lagging behind still, because most of our things are being dictated by the people outside, either directly or indirectly. On the side of the economic independence, I think the country also needs a lot to develop on that particular aspect, because looking at the debt we have in right now, we have around billions of dollars of debt that the country owes to foreign nations. And as the saying goes, that he who pays the pipe dictates the tune. So it means that we've been dictated directly or indirectly because of those debts that we owe in those other countries.
For me, it marks a very important moment, and it's a defining moment for this country, looking at the struggles and the sacrifices made by our founding fathers. So I think it's a defining moment, a moment of reflection and a moment of meditation, to be able to look at where we came from and how far we have gone. Because for me, the whole essence is about taking charge of your own affairs and being the architect of your own destiny.
Independence means a lot to me, because if you look at it, from the time we gain our independence, we are in the hands of the British. So meaning we cannot decide anything on our own. So all decisions are made by people who define what we can be. So, but gaining independence means now we get ownership of ourselves. We can decide for ourselves. We can decide our destiny. At least that means a lot to me.
Celebrating our independence will be very, very, very important, because it reminds of us about the past.
We shouldn't celebrate this thing because we haven't achieved anything.
To me, it is not relevant for us to celebrate independence as of now.
Yes, we should, because it's important to be liberated.
In a narrow point of view, I think independence will be celebrated by the Gambia until and unless we at least achieve or climb the ladder a bit higher.
Well, I will say yes, we have to celebrate it because it's a big day. It's a day that all citizens should celebrate. It's a day that we should show our solidarity towards the nation. So it's a big day for us. We really have to celebrate it.
We, the Gambians, should be proud of it and, be happy to celebrate it because it's the day that we have our independence.
I think it's worth celebrating because considerable effort, time, and sacrifice was put into this endeavor, and we are here today enjoying that. But basically, I think we need to do more as a country, as citizens. We need to put the country first and realize that the independence we're talking about today and celebrating, or about to celebrate tomorrow, did not come on a silver plate. It came as a result of a lot of sacrifices. It came as a result of a lot of commitment. And the people who did that were looking at the country first.
Well, I think, there is the need for us to celebrate it because when you gain yourself, you gain your independence, at least you can do a lot on your own. And it needs celebrating also because people were involved in the struggle to get ourselves from the colonial rule. So those people, we need to recognize their effort. So there's a word for celebrating the independence. At least we remember those who fought for this independence.
The first perfume bar in Gambia. By Parfum, it's another way to perfume yourself in a luxurious and attractive shop called By Parfum. Come and find rare and natural Churai flowers. And also the fragrances of the biggest popular brands: Oud Private Collection, Air Freshener, Flora, Venus, Fresh 24, and many other products. With By Parfum, discover the Parfum Bar, a new concept in the world. Personalize your scents with the Parfum Bar. With the Parfum Bar, choose the perfume that looks like you. By Parfum, 54 Kairoba Avenue, opposite to American Embassy. You can join us on 7700-035 or 529-1888. By Parfum Gambia. You will really love it.
maa ngi fine si loo nekk maa ngi nii rek yow yaa ngi toog nii mel ni ku amut liggéey xanaa jeexaluloo sa course bi
man jeexal naa suma course bi waaye maa ngi bugg a commencer suma liggéey bi mu ngi mel ni bagage yi yëpp a seer maa ngi toog
xanaa demuloo INCO
lan mooy INCO
da nga bëgg xam lan mooy INCO waaw jógal ñu fii mooy INCO soo ñëwee suñ place looy njëkk a bàyyi xel mooy INCO
maanaam INGCO
waaw kay am na nag ci dëkk bi fii place yu bari ñu ngi jël suñu kolo bi di ko mbuboo waa pire ji fii la bu ko jaawaale soo ñëwee rek seetal brand bi lii mooy di INCO su nekkee kapinta nga maçon fiita mécanique bi sax kaa ñu dugg si biir boo waa ji kontaan naa de lii mooy INCO soo fi ñëwee rek kontaan fii nag Jimpex mooy seen maakaan bu mag bi waaw soo demee Sukuta traffic light ñu ngi fa amee tamit beneen branche
maanaam Sukuta traffic light am nañ fa beneen branche
ak INCO adduna bi mu ngi si sa loxo ana añ bi
añ amut demal si waañ bi nga seet añ amut
bébé lu xew
bagage yi benn baaxut
waaw
gaz ko bi dafa yaaxu kettle bi yaaxu fridge bi yaaxu yow dafa mel ni fi nga jënda ñoo amul bagage yu baax wala lan la
jóga maa laa yóbbu bagage fu mu gën a baaxee nañ dem
bébi fii mooy Vestel xoolal ma waañ yi xoolal ma freezer yi gaz cooker yi washing machine yi feeri courant boo bugga fridge yu nganda yi flat screen boo bugga air condition yi lépp loo bugga pour sa dëkkuwaay Vestel am nañ ko mun nga ñoo seeti ñu ngi jàkkaarloo ak West African International School bi diggante Nigerian Embassy bi ak Gamworks mun nga ñoo call si 345 6789 345 6789 Vestel.
From an early age, we value the feeling of speed, the thrill of the wind as we rush to our destinations, the feel of our feet bounding over the ground, the way the world blurs as we rush by. Faster, faster than a ray of light, I'm flying. I have one speed, I have one gear. Keep on moving, I won't stop till I get there. Want to experience speed? Then subscribe to the Gambia's 4G LTE mobile network, QCell. With speeds of up to 45 megabytes per second, you can get online in the blink of an eye. The fastest browsing, stream videos faster, do much more faster. Just dial *335# to join the fastest club. QCell's 4G LTE mobile network. Go faster. For more information, call 111. QCell, Senior Boss. We innovate, others follow.
QTV, and you're watching our Independence Day reflection. Just before the break there, we heard some students at UTG talking about what independence means to them, and as I said in the lead up to that, quite divergent views. They weren't all saying exactly the same thing. And I gather my colleague Ajibintu Drame is standing by, and she's lined up somebody else to speak to us. Ajibintu, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Great.
Waaw comme nu ma leen ko waxee rek wax neen la indil independence celebration bi live ak QTV so ñu ngi doxantu nii si syndicat bi may wax pour ma waxtaana suma yaay mais noo tudd ak noo sant.
Man Ami Diop laa tudd.
Ami Diop.
Waaw.
Fan si Gambie nga jógee ko.
Maa ngi dëkk Ibo Town. Waaw.
So xam nga ne tey la independence.
Waaw xam naa ne tey mooy independence.
Tey nag loo wax si bés gi tey.
Tey li ma wax si bés tey leen am juróom fukki at ak juróom benn maa ngi ñaanal Gambie na dem kanam di ñaanal ñi amul leneen yàlla may ñi tëdd si lopitaan beneen yàlla aar si feebar bi ñu nu jiitu yàlla jékkal leen bàkkaar xaar leen arjana ñi am jabar yàlla may leen ñu toppatoo seen jabar yi ñi amul yàlla nañu am njakar.
So léegi independence bi noo ko laan dundee ak léegi.
Independence bu njëkk bi ak bu léegi nekkul benn na nit yi léegi di nuy génn waaye bu njëkk bi moom ñëpp ay génn ñëpp foo si man triakulo laa jóge suñu kër dem si independence waaye léegi amatuma jot boobu boo xoolee yaa ngi raba loolu bu ci kër gi pour léegi pour nga jóg muuf pour dem independence dafa nekk problème si yow waaye maa ngi ñaanal Gambie yal na Gambie dem si kanam fu ñu ko séntu yal na raw loolu noonu maa ngi di ñaanal Gambie all di Gambia fu waaye nekk si àdduna bi rek maa ngi di ñaanal jàmm yal na yàlla aar leen nga mutal leen si musiba ak saytaane.
ok yaa ngi wax kaddu pour dëkk bi jëm kanam si kaddu googu noonu kañ nga séntu Gambia in the next 10 years or 15 years.
jàng baal ñaan naa la maa ngi ñaanal Gambie ni daal yal na Gambie am jàmm képp fu waay ne rek yal na la yàlla may jàmm di ñaanal réew mi daal ceeñi si daal na ceeñi si am loolu rek lay ñaan yàlla yal na yàlla may jàmm rek. musal na si saytaane ak musiba ceeñis leen ba yal na Gambia ceeñ waaw jafe-jafe bi nu nekk yal na yàlla gën si jafe-jafe bi waaw wasalaam.
waaw ñoo ko déggandoor soo léegi dañoo doxantu nag si beneen ndaw si koo xamante ne mu ngi nekkee boor gële ne le ñu doxantoo moom ñu waxtaanaa moom.
And my colleague Ajibintu Drame going off in search of more people to capture and speak to about this day. Before the break, we heard from these folks from UTG. Tony Blair famously said the three most important things for his administration was education. Those students there, Aliyu, I said again also before that they're kind of closer to your age than to mine and CDs and Mboji's. Do you get the sense of what you heard from them, that this is the kind of discussion that happens with folks your friends, your contemporaries, when they discuss things like independence and why we should commemorate or celebrate?
Certainly, their views actually represent the views of the youth of the country. As you said, the issue of celebrating independence is something that is, people are divided in terms of opinion, because like they will say, some believe the Gambia is not totally independent. I mean, it's just a formality. The fact that, we still depend largely on loan and grants to have our development, and not only that, so many things that we want for ourselves is dependable on outside generosity of countries that we think are more developed than our country. For others, it is worth celebrating because at least it marks the end of British rule, and then Gambia was given that self-independence, even though, as Sidi said, it is also something that is still debatable. Some believe the actual independence was in 1970, if I'm right, and not actually in 1965. But then actually their views represent the views of the general youth population of the Gambia.
Thank you for that. And I gather Ajibintu has found somebody already willing to speak to us again here on QTV. And as I said, you're watching QTV, you're watching our Independence Day commemoration special. Ajibintu.
Yeah. Wow, bete nak amat nen suma benen yaay ko xamantene dañoo waxtaana mom momit ya boy no tudat no santa
ay tudde ya mama ne deka talindi faro kono
so legi tay lo xam ci independence Gambia tay
xana content ndax independent moy am sa bop ta man si la juddoon ma ngi juddoon 18 February 1965 kon so len mako laaje dina ci content lol am sa bopa mom sa bopa dafa neex kon ñu ngi ñaan yalla ñu célébrer ko ci bare bare at yu bare bare di ñu fekk ci jàmm fekk ñu ci wër ak dal ak sutura loolu la ci xam li ma ci xam bariwul ndax li nga juddu nekk ci di dem be waxtu bi xam nga lu neex la man de neex na ma ndax si la juddu ndax ku ci juddu ba waxtu bi do ñaka xorom do ñaka aajo li may ñaan yalla yokal ma fan yokal ko Gambien si ñu fekke yu bare ak bari ak yeen ñi liggéey yalla may leen si jàmm ak sutura ndax am sa bop dana daxu
so legi yow fo gis Gambia in the next 10 or 15 years
ca kanam rek ndax dunda jafe maga jafe dunda mo jafe di ñaan yalla subhanahu wa ta'ala mu may ñu dunda di fekke Gambia muy dem ci kanam dal waye buguñ ci ben delu gannaaw dem ci kanam rek ndax ñu ne dunda jafe waye maga jafe fekke mo jafe lu ñuy ñaan yalla may ñu ci dunda fekke ak am ak wër loolu la gis ci Gambia te foog naa ne loolu yalla dañ ko may ndax dañuy julli dañuy or te yalla loko ñaan mu may la li te rek moy nga ñak ko ñaan ñu ko ñaan ñu ngi ñaan mu may ñu gudd fan ak wër gi yaram ak wër so amul wër amulo da
so your time bobu no de celebrate independence ga won
say yu joté rek ma xamné si la juddu rek baaf de té dem na di dunda be suma xalé yi ñoko nekk di def salade beeg yeb dem na suma fos dom bi bima nogé di ko wax mu ne ma tay may def yeb yabuy ñi ci gëna ndaw be ci caat bi ay driver lañ ñu ne ma ki na may def cake bi xam nga lolu neex la té dama ko daan defal suma boppa jos ay get together di ataya ak yoyu non ak sumay morom
kon yow legi lola remember independence num daan démé ak num daan mel
dina daan neex trop parce que dañ daan dem si di def bobu ma ngi nekk xalé di dem school di def match pass di ci def ay drama yoy yep li ci manki dal lolu nonu mo ci xawa manki ciosan biñ ci daan def mo xawa manki té dama bëgg ñu dekkal ci ciosan bu baax parce que fatalé ko la fatalé ko suñ ci jotté da ngay fatalé xalé yu juddu bes ñu xamné li mo fi xewon mo war di continuer xam seen ada ak ciosan non la ko gisé
baxna jërëjëf kaddu yi rafet na té mom téla birthday ya mom happy birthday ya waaw so légui ñu déllu wat ci studio bi ñu waxa Mr Adi jërë ngeen jëf.
Thank you there, Ajibintu, finding some interesting folks to speak to so far, and thanks for that. Now you're back here in the studio, and if I could come to Sidi, and Sidi in Mandinka addressing the point regarding UTG students and them being the future and the kind of things that they think about and talk about.
Thank you very much, Ade. Abarakabake Ade, albe programo min nomo kang wala Gambia la lunti ka fa ko independent nga video min je findita television to jang min keta University of the Gambia dinewol di karam da dinewol min be makama bato karam la karola ye mirol min fo ikamo ikafo dunia katamale singotala dalilo minti ni yajibe jamano to woto antol famalu mamolu wolbe kato ke kam pour Gambia bo tubabo la Maroko no ini mirol min dunda kono ani bi funding kel ni fonde musolbe kacha min ke ka University of the Gambia ka foko toñade Gambia fon sotole don sa toñade Gambia ma fon soto don sa Gambia ba fon soto la nyami wala natara tumo min na mantra sujure mola ko na korra mantra mobulu na singiro mantra mobulu wala kede sedero on mosa va jikobi jele tumo min na funding kel ni fonde musol mi ko sini wala marro kala nyum bankunko wala tambela nyato wala aje ko wato sital pour ye miroke wo miro minati kajambe bulo min kono na demaro la karola na safaro la karola na julaya la karola na seno bunda la karola kajo ka ke kudi mi yalon asana fawulu Gambia dingole fana sa si setaro daha kono e setaro tankon kono ani wo kayro kono on kuler mi yalon ka kumayata bake wodo nyimul lunnati ko ya fanyami pour ngam miro minati mbe muntole kunum mbe muntole bi animbita damin sening nyine kumayata pour ngaje Gambia bimbe tembo minto te adefana min fo kachato ja anen kachala kotong le mefo pour nga fo nyinin kan sa mena kenon na banko e janembe nyinin karo kala banko sa mena kentuli parce que bi niajibe jama ba nka wosi Gambia nyanta mena kelantole bar mbikam fa nyinin kan sa mena kenon na banko e ka kuke banko e amanke fendi mi alon ko safa ko lanna tambo milti wolom ko kuke mi alon ko asa do tora asa signo tora waranta modo tora bar femfe natare sa keno banko ko pro banko la nyatata londo la yiro wala karola seno la yiro wala karola signo yala yiro wala karola na ado ka bambande ado min kada hada sare ngolti kulen mi la kuma yata bakke Mr. Ade.
Thank you. Aliou, if I could ask you in Wolof, please.
Yes, jërëjëf Ade Dramé jërëjëf Sidi Cissé ak Modou Mbodj mbokk yi ñu ngi fàttali ne ba léegi naa ngi seetaan QTV li nga xam ne moo nekk live broadcast si bés boo xam ne si bés bi la Gambia amoon seen independence 18 February 1965 mu nekk loo xam ne dafa tombé woon parce que alxames la tombé woon te itam mu nekk alxames so dafa nekk loo xam ne bés bu am solo la pour Gambia waaye comme ni ngeen ko seetaane rek indi nañ fi vidéos yu bari gis nañ ne suñu naataango yi Baboucarr Cissé right now mu ngi Brikama Aji Bintou Dramé génn na mu ngi Serekunda si boori syndicat bi di waxtaan ak Gambia si di leen laaj naka lañ gisee independence bi tey ak la lañ nekk sentu at yi ñëw waaye dafa nekk loo xam ne lu am solo la gis nañ tam bi leen nañ ay vidéo boo xam ne ñu ngi ko jëloon si University of the Gambia fi nga xam ne am nañ daw yoo xam ne foofu lañ nekk di jàngee te ñu ne ñoom ñoo nekk kilifa ñoom ñoo war a doon kilifa réew mi at yi ñëw te gis nañ ñëpp def mel ni si seen xalaat yi nekkuñ ci benn si wàllu independence bi ñu ne ñu ngi wax ne Gambia waaw am na independence war nañ koo màggal waaye ñeneen ba léegi ñu ngi bañ ne yes Mr. Ade.
No, carry on.
Ok, am na ñoo xam ne ba léegi ñu ngi bañ ne Gambia amagut boppam parce que soo ko xoolee ba léegi suñu yaakaar bi yëpp moo nekk ne ndimbal buñ war a am si tubaab yi pour mun a gis ne développe suñu réew mi waaye li gën a am solo moo nekk ne bés mu mel ni tey Gambien si dañu war a fàttaliku ñu delluwaa soon xel ñu pour jéem a xalaat ne war ñoo xalaat Gambia lan lañ ñu mun a defaral waaye ñun lan lañ war a mun a defar Gambia pour mun a gis réew mi def si kanam naam dëgg la Gambia am na indépendant waaye liñ nangatoo moo nekk ne ba léegi am na ay jafe-jafe yoo xam ne réew mi war naa passé stage bii nii soo xoolee si wàll bunti jànga bi école yi taxut koo mel noonu lopitaan yi am na yu bari yoo xam ne mu ngi des ba léegi si wàllu mbéy mi am na lu bari ba léegi mu ngi des so Gambia lan lañ war a mën a def pour mën a gis ne at yi ñëw dëkk boo xam ne dafa am independent am na yoo xam ne warloo depend ci outside support. Yes, Mr. Ade.
I gather Aliou, our colleague Baboucarr Cissé is about to join us and he's found somebody. Baboucarr, can you hear me?
Yes, Ade, thank you so much. Badingol nga fala nyaminten bi mfelenti Brikama sate kono ko nga fala nyamin foloto bi len sanji talulu sanji woro kabrin Gambia fansoto wolem Gambia la independenti silambe damin to bi nata Brikama sate kono fele Brikama marché to be tamantama na andu ni molbe kachala pour sa fomole independent mi alon ko lunkuma balem na tarikoti e munen miraje badingo do felenti pour nase kacha mbokum tour bi ak santa bi
man Amin Ndiaye Serigne man maay Amin Ndiaye Serigne Fallou
Amin Ndiaye tey mooy 56 years since Gambia bu mu amee boppam mooy independence bi yow tamit tey noo gisee bés bi
alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin ñu ngi ñaan yàlla ñu màggal ko ay at yu bare fekke ko wér ak wérle réew mi yàlla def fi jàmm dew fi naataange def fi gudda fan ak wér loolu la ñooy ñaan ndax pour fekkee lii lu jafe la ñi ko fekkee defuñu ay mayuñu yàlla dara ñi ko fekkee wu tamit defuñu yàlla dara kon ñun ñu ki fekkee ñu ngi sant yàlla bu baax di julli seenant bi waaw loolu laa am pour wax waaye nag ñun waa marché bi lañ ñun ñooy waa Kiwkona Brikama Market ñun ñoo amoon safara bu metti boobu amoon waa kiw sel ñëw amul luñ defut Mouhamed yaa ba tey waa marché bi ñu ngi lay gërëm di la santa faatewuñ sa affaire marché bi yëpp ñu ngi lay gërëm di la santa di la wax ne sa am bi yàlla na ko yàlla yokka place yi yàlla yokka ko ñii ñëw tamit yàlla yokka leen ubbi wërsëg yi nangu ñaani waaye nag indépendant bi niñ koy célébrer léegi ak ñun niñ ko daan célébrer bokkut ndax time boobu ñun su ñooy celebrate independence su independence di jot si 2 days before independence préparation bi dafay mel ni ëllëg la Tabaski waaye léegi gisuma student yi di def loolu ndax time boobu su independence di ñëw di nga jënd daala bu bees di nga ñawlu uniforme bu bees kawaas bu bees sa boppa bi time boobu straightin bariwutoon waaye stretching kooma gi amoon ñun xale jigéen yi dinañ stretch suñu boppa ba mu rafet ñu rolas ko ba mu nice ñu dem maaji su ngoonee ñu am suñ sports activities yi kenn du am ñaari xel sa parents yi sa ticket yële sa kër ñoo lay delloo si kër bi waaye léegi nag gooma ne loolu amatina fi mu nekk nii ñu ngee ñaan nguur gi ñu delloo waat loolu la woon fa woon daf dee baax su ko defee xale xam lan mooy cosaan ñu delluwaat si cosaan yi loolu lañ bugga waaw loolu la ñooy ñaan nguur gi ak kilifa dëkk bi yëpp pour ñu def loolu waaw.
jërëjëf Amy Ndiaye léegi loo bëgg a ñaan ci jàmm réew mi indi indépendance am sa boppa la te am leen suñu boppa loo bëgg a ñaan.
am sa boppa mooy yëpp ndaxte soo gisee ñuy nekk fii yow nga am joti ñëw di ma interview keneen ak keneen ak keneen dañ am suñu boppa moo tax suñ amutoon suñu boppa lii du am na réew yoo xam ne amuñ joti lii waaye ndegam Gambia am nañ lii ñu ngi sant yàlla bu baax a baax a baax a baax a baax di julli si yonent bi ñaan mu yokku réew mi jàmm gi fi nekk yal na ko yàlla yokka ñu toog ba di ko nettali ay at yu bare si gudda fan ak wér réew mi ñu ngee ñaan naataago fi mu nekk ni ñëpp a ngee jooy ne bagage yi dañ seer.
dégg nga Amy Ndiaye léegi noo gisee QTV.
QTV kay man maa ko moom QTV moom suma bos la Baboucarr boobu amul pour laajte sax boobu soo ma laajtee daf may naari ndax QTV lu xew dinañ ma toppasi laka marché bi ñëw nañ toppasi ma Tabaski bi ñëw nañ suma kër ndewenal si bii tamit ñu ngi nii ñëw nañ ut si ma ba gis ma bugga maa interview kon nag lu mel noonu nit ñi bari nañ si dëkk bi te nit ñaa ngi fi ñu ngi si réew mi waaye ñëw nañ toppasi ma interview nañ ma kontaan naa si torop maa ngi leen di ñaanal lii yal na ko yàlla saxal place yi yàlla yokka ko QTV yal nañ toog liñ bugg a ci seen bopp yàlla defal leen ko seen caméraman yi ak liggéeykat yi depuis ci suuf ba ci kaw.
waaw Amy Ndiaye joguma la waaye wax nga fi Kiwkona lu Kiwkona.
Kiwkona marché bi lañ tuddee Kiwkona fi laka foofu lañ tuddee Kiwkona foofu léegi sooy ut dara si marché bi soo ñëwee soo ne maa ngi laajte Kiwkona dañ lay indi xale bu toll nii sax soo téyee si loxo bi nga ne ko Kiwkona dina la indi ba si place bi foofu mooy Kiwkona mooy fi lakkoon year before last laka bi amoon waaw foofu moo tax ñu téye ko Kiwkona Mouhamed Dia lim si def amuñ luñ ko fayee ndax dégg nañ QTV dégg nañ Qcell dégg nañ Qlii ñun tam ñu tuddee Kiwkona mu aat ko si bos am léegi mu nekk ñaata compagnies ngeen am léegi Kiwkona tamit bokk na si yëf yi léegi.
ok Kiwkona tamit léegi si Q group la génn.
si Q group bi la génn léegi si la bokk Baboucarr waaw.
jërëjëf Amy kooku mooy Amy Ndiaye part of the Brikama Market Committee te mu ne tamit Kiwkona ñoom ñoo fa nekk di liggéey Kiwkona mooy boutique bu marché bi lakkee ñoom ñoo form that association te tuddee seen corner bi seen area boutique yi Kiwkona jërëjëf Amy Ndiaye maa ngi lay gërëm bu baax a baax back to you Ade Dramé in the studio.
Baboucarr Cissé there at Brikama. And Mr. Mbodj, again, before we went out there and before I came to my colleagues to my right here, we talked about the UTG and we looked at the video. And one of the things struck me was that, one of them was talking about the founding fathers. And we saw the list because there was a conference that took place this week. where they wanted to celebrate the founding fathers. We've talked about Edward Francis Small, we've talked about Sadauda Jawara. Is that the problem? We don't mention any women. Is that part of the problem?
Some people might say that, even though, yes, when you look at our history, you'll see that a lot of women contributed.
Sure.
I remember when I was reading Java's book, there was somebody, was it Sinclair Juve? We had somebody called Sinclair Juve who was in the National Assembly and stuff like that. Yeah. And even, I don't know, can we include in this Ramatulai Kinte? Yes. Well, Augusta Mahoney, who used the pen name when she wrote Rebellion.
That's right.
That was all part of the fight against a certain oppression.
Yeah.
Yes, but hopefully historians can redress that. We've not been doing in the past, but more writing, digging, excavating.
Well,
than
in the same way that CD had kind of challenged us at the beginning to mention people like Edward Francis Small and the central role they played to this journey that we're still on. Let's not. It's not the end of a journey. I mean, the journey is kind of only 56 years long, and you know, other countries have had independence for 100, 200 years and more.
And that is very crucial.
Yeah, but the reason I mentioned about women is that even if you look at the National Assembly today, representation in terms of the women who are there is minuscule compared to even some of our neighbors. Why is that?
Absolutely, I'm sure you've got the conventional line. It's a traditional society. It's more of a patriarchy, and we also have to understand that for a long time, a lot of people privileged the boys to go to school than women. So they started from that base. But gradually, opportunities opened up, so they're getting more educated now and the like. And given that there's a change in certain attitudes as well, gradually we're inching our way towards recognizing, you know, women as equal partners in this. But it will take time before the patriarchy will thin out. Sure. It will take time, but I think that we are making certain strides in this. Our vice president is a woman.
Well, I was about to say to Aliyu that based on what the UTG and we heard there are some female students there, and we've had not just one but more than one vice president female. Will Gambia ever have a female president? Can you see that day? I mean, before you answer that, think of a situation like Pakistan, which was equally patriarchal, and yet they had an elected female prime minister. Could it happen?
Yes, it is just something that one can rule out at the moment, because the interest is there. We are seeing some women who are not expressing interest in actually contesting elections. Already we have an independent candidate who has already expressed her interest to contest in the upcoming election, and then there's another female who's also contesting to lead the PPP. We have Pumanjai who has expressed interest in leading the PPP, even though we know PPP is already going to form a coalition. But it is something that many Gambians will be looking forward to. At least it is something that we would like to see how will it look like having a woman as a president. I mean, perhaps a lot could change if we have a woman president. It remains to be seen. We saw in Liberia, we have Ella Johnson Sirleaf, who actually was the president there. But it's something that many Gambians will really like to experience. How will the Gambia look like under a female president?
It's an interesting one, because Sierra Leone had the first female cabinet minister in 1961 at independence in sub-Saharan Africa, no less. But we still have not had a female president, so a long way to go. But now we also spoke to Seth Matijao about independence and for his reflections on independence. Let's have a look at this video, and when we come back, we'll discuss some of what he has to say.
Independence is about owning your country, and also taking charge of it. And if we're looking at us today in 56 years, going back to 1965, when people were saying that the Gambia was going to be an improbable nation, or is an improbable nation, I think we have come a long way. We have come a long way to today, and I still think that the state has survived, but of course there are a lot of internal challenges that we need to address, and of course we shouldn't forget that state building is not a one-day affair. It is a process, and every generation have a responsibility to take charge of the state building process. But one of the issues that are still problematic for us is that we have not been able to hand down the history of this country from one generation to another effectively. And I think celebrating our 56th year anniversary, we need to reflect on that, especially the bravery and sacrifices that were committed by our nationalist leaders. We celebrate them, and are happy that today we have a country of our own. Some of my friends will not be very happy for me to quote Bakary Rice, because he has been termed as a racist in terms of the way he described Gambia when he was writing at a time when Gambia gained independence and calling Gambia an improbable nation. And his argument was that we did not have natural resources, and then he listed certain things. For instance, there was no daily newspapers, there was no university. In 1965 the picture was really bleak. But then if you look at us where we are now in 2021, there is a university in this country. There are so many newspapers, there are so many political parties, there are so many progress that have been made so far. So the Gambia has moved to a large extent, but also there are also challenges that continue to persist, especially issues around poverty. I haven't seen much change in terms of the poverty level. Still people are poor, despite the fact that we have our ocean, despite that we have the natural resources to uplift our living standards. But in terms of progress, we have progress, and that should be recognized. And I think also one other aspect that was so much focused on, and today there's little friction in the sense that it was the social cohesion. And if you look at Gambia moving from 1965 all the way, you see that it has been called a relatively peaceful country. We have been able to manage that. We have been able to ensure that we are intact. And so this year we need to reflect more on some of these achievements that we have made, but more so to look at critically the areas where we still feel we need to do more and do better, especially on the areas of poverty.
And then we had Said Mati Jao. And before we go to discuss what he had to say there, my colleague Babukar Sise has found somebody very interesting to speak to us at Brikama. Babukar Sise, over to you again in Brikama.
Thank you so much, Ade Drame. Badungol Felare Brikama Marseille Kono, QTV bija live, Ruby independent be caring, na banko e sanji talulu sanji woros robi. Otom be taman kan ni molbe kacha kan pour ya fo mole mun kontane kulesro nyum koti jang mfelante nim mero min bijang ada ka jabolle wafi anin kanol anin pompiterol afale marché kono jang mbe konton na independent wala
yo assalamu alaikum independent
to dima anin konton
nde amina sanya wala mun independent wala alhamdulillah bari mbota tibabu lamara robul sangam faso alhamdulillah me o kam adiyatal kata indra simala ni jata gendani harje firi marse de mbada manda man kanjanne lugo do bi jaay diya lugo do bi jaate diya ma butu nakum wata jam fala ba ma sor harje firi wala simaya anin tankoni harje firi ila ba hormo mamma be la jaar bi ñol
yo mero sanji talulu ani woro kabi bango ato mina gambe ba fansot la ayatra ite be sanji jelu
be sanji tang ani fu
oda kamde ko independent kalam tala kala nyaadi ne yam le lo ngako to
kalam ta independent adiatal sa fa adiatal bara entran niela ado ko to tare niela simayani jata kende ani harje firo
anin suturo anin tanko
ayo sango sang independent ka jural jawra la jamano sango sang ka jural hali sai akontita wala fo bi wotumo e hakilo ni hakilo murundaka aka jura no nyaadi ne wotumo
aka jura nyami sembo ka warale akadi afana ala ten tolo sayode nka kalam dal kat mota fale ta kalam dal barotu mo ka sembo ka warale bar sayo ko a sembo bo ka wonyo wara bak a sembo bo ka wonyo wara bak bar wo fana ala ten tolo ala ten tolo kol siat si fal mankiya fanam ala ten tolo
yo salan QTV ntol botna wolto kana jang ka itande dunia bela mbe kering na banko kan jambi ya ika QTV jubele bang and ya QTV je nyari ne
do bi je den ka jubi betiyata bayrin ka kibarol moy bani be banko ka nyante la banko ya muta e ka la moy kata betero kuma ta wala nyam isa kumol moy bar ni ma la moy fana yale ta kuma moy lola ha betiyata QTV a betiyata ana do kulal be betiyata bayrin kuma sahar ngol la ka foji yo kuma kendo la ka foji sila ni ma jibe fan yale to kumol moyno bar ni ka jibe nyante yalla mo e ka mo mbe duale be do kulal be sima ba ni jata kendani harje fil alama kayo sabatin na banko ka ila ba hormo mani fala duwa hormo na mo fulo wor sar yaran karim
yo mero barake bake mbeton lambe jale law diam nyima kan Are Drame and Aliou Cissé and co at the studios. Back to you there.
And thank you there, Babukar Cissé, and still in Brikama. And if you would like to call in and either discuss what you've heard, reflections on Independence Day, the number 5050 505. Call us and share your views with us, and my colleagues here will take the calls or the messages or the questions that you may have. So you're more than happy. 5050 505 is the number to call, and if you would want to share some of your views, some of your reflections on Independence Day. CD, I was talking about female, and we heard from a woman there, representation here in the Gambia. I think Mr. Amboja and Aliou Cissé have kind of given us a hint of why it's not happened here. When you go to the universities now, a lot of women are there. They're going to get their degrees, some of them are going to their masters and so on. Is it because of the kind of macho, aggressive nature of our politics that has made some women not want to get involved?
I believe so, because one of the first elected parliamentarian was Newman Sadasane Boja. Before her, we have Aja Jonkunda in Brikama, tried on an opposition ticket.
That's right.
But when we had the late Aja Newman Sadasane Boja, some of us who can remember that politics was very dirty then, because the idea of having women, taking political position was sort of coming up at the time, but was actually not there yet, because people tend to think women should just, take care of the kids, stay at home, they're not very educated and all those things.
Sure.
So, fortunately, she won because she ran on a PPP ticket.
Right, yes.
A PPP ticket, I think that was, and from the family where she came from,
they
also supported her and that. But the reason why we find ourselves in that situation where women are left out, we must go back to how the whole politics was here. In fact, when you talk about the voting, for example,
yes.
Many people don't even know that not everybody in the country was voting at the early stage of voting. We had all the people in Banjul voting, and we had the Combo St. Mary voting, and before we had the provincial people voting. So what was responsible for all this?
Sure.
And also, we must talk about the foot soldiers as well. We talk about Francis Small.
And I gather there's a caller.
There's a caller.
It was worth us putting out that number. Wow. Yeah, caller, can you hear us? You're on QTV, and this is our Independence Reflection.
Hello?
Yeah. Hello, can you turn down your TV? We can hear it echoing in the background. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, waaw maa ngi sant yàlla di leen ñaanal ñu fekkee at yu bëree bëri ba tey ñu fekkee ko. waaw di ñaanal ki tombé woon indépendance yàlla xaree ko àjjana.
amiin amiin.
yàlla jégal ko ay bàkkaaram yëpp baax yi mu fi def yëpp yal na ko yàlla fay. ñun Baba Jawara. waaw ñun Baba Jawara lañ tombé woon. moom lañ tombé woon waaw ñu ko ñaanal. waaw.
ok
ko ñaanal yàlla xaree ko àjjana. waaw ci toog fii ñu ngi ko ñaan mu aw ci tànk Yaya Jammeh tànk.
ok thank you.
mu aw ci tànk Baba Jammeh.
jërëjëf yaa boy.
Yes, Ali, anything to respond to that, Ali?
Yeah, actually, she is just trying to emphasize the importance of the day and praying that, we live to witness many more to come, and of course praying for the late Sadaura Jawara, who actually has, was very crucial, was very, played a key role in having the Gambia get its independence.
Sure, yeah. And thank you for that. And if I can just say to any other viewers who want to phone in, 5050-505, please turn your TV down whilst you're on the phone, otherwise you'll get that echo and that feedback. But you're more than welcome to call in with your reflections, or even as happened with the last one. And I gather we have another caller on the line. Please, caller, hello, and welcome to the program.
Yes, hello.
Hello.
Yeah, greetings to all the panelists there.
Thank you.
And to you too.
Thank you.
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. It is very important. Yes, today marks an important day in the history of the Gambia.
Yes, carry on.
Continue talking. Don't listen to your television.
Don't listen
to your phone, please.
Just all right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Please, just keep on talking. Yeah.
It's almost 56 years since the Gambia, gained her independence.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that is much to celebrate.
Okay. And why do you say that?
The simple fact that when an average Gambian is still struggling, to find ends meet and to put food on the table, poverty is on the rise. When women are dying in labor on a daily basis, I don't think there is much to celebrate. I think we have to reset the button.
Sure.
And then pave way for genuine development to take place. That would be the most important thing.
Thank you for that. Thank you. That's some very wise words there. Thank you, caller. And as we heard from the caller, I forgot to ask him his name. But pretty much what's been said on the panel and in some of the videos that we've seen. And he used the phrase to reset the button. A very good phrase which we can steal from him, because essentially what we've said, we've said all along that it's not a celebration. It's about a reflection. And that's why we've deliberately used this as a reflection. And I think because of COVID and because of today's weather, we've been forced to actually reflect on what that has. And now we spoke to a veteran politician. There's another call coming through, and then we'll go to a video of Bibi Dabo, a veteran politician. But caller, thank you. You're on QTV. Caller's gone. The caller's dropped. So we have a video, and we spoke to Bibi Dabo, and this is some of what he had to say about independence.
The event is momentous. It marked the birth of the modern Gambian nation. Certainly it's worth celebrating. I suspect the direction from which you are coming, that is the view held in certain quarters, that given the present problems and challenges we are having, we may not as a people claim to have much to celebrate. Well, that's a view some people hold. But whatever it is, I believe the importance of the country acceding to independence, independent statehood, is such an important that it must be celebrated. And I don't even believe that there is nothing to celebrate. Indeed, there are huge challenges. If people like me stepping back into the political arena, is precisely because we are aware of the great challenges facing the country, the great difficulties. But there is no reason to deny the historical fact that independence meant that much to our people. I mean, the existence of those challenges does not take away the fact that we are independent. People can argue about such details as to whether we are free in 100% sense of the word. Perhaps not, and perhaps that's not the intention anyway. This world now is a highly independent world, and it's not possible to have complete independence, or autarky as they call it. We don't desire that. But we are independent, and the challenges are maybe in the nature of things. What we need to do is to brace ourselves to overcome those challenges. The challenges are multidimensional, political, institutional, economic, social. In all those fields we have huge challenges. Some of them are man-made, in fact made by Gambians, if you like to say. But I think if we continue resolved, we can overcome them. I think a lot will depend on the leadership that the Gambian people choose for themselves. For the last 27 years, the country has been living great difficulties, traumatizing in some respects, but a lot of it flows from the quality of leadership provided. It's a quality of leadership which for most part was not only illegitimate because it came through unconstitutional means, but it was also very, very reactionary in the sense that it didn't care in a meaningful way about the welfare of the people. It cared about perpetuating itself in power. And you had a situation where for 22 years, the resources of the country are devoted to primarily to the objective of perpetuating the ruling clique in power. And the poverty in the country has become so extreme because the main areas of economic activity for achieving progress, essentially livestock development, fisheries, agriculture, have all seen tremendous underinvestment. The government has failed to invest to the required level in these critical areas, and of course the economy collapsed. For a long time now, we now depended a bit on tourism, small tourism industry, which again this year is hit by the COVID. So we have huge problems, but they flow mainly, good 90% or more, from the quality of leadership.
Politician Bibi Dabo, the veteran politician. I hope you won't mind me saying. But now my colleague Babukar Sise is back with us on the line from Brikama. Babukar Sise, over to you.
Thank you so much, Ale Drame. Again, we are in Brikama. Ngamodo financial ya mi alonko. Fanang be kumandim fula mole independent wala karola mi alonko bi be wala jura kan mi alonko Gambia sanji talulu sanji wor awole sodobi. Mbadin todi manin konton.
Nte toy ka fontele Madi Numo Konte Brikama West Coast region.
Yo Madi Numo Konte bi mulun kuma balti na tariko kono. Wala na independent bi fana yamne so be fala bi lungoto.
Yo foka Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ka tentu drong. Bay joni site baluta for lungo memuko bi jika independent o jura ya mabe ina mabe akare sanjama mabe obe mo ala tentoleti andun ka duwa ke dron purum be sanyo independent jama mabe
wotu mo independent o gato bina bita kan skula ninsan yamune je ifrata nyaade ne
fato bi jele yalo ne kunun jube bi jube kunun nimbi manke kelente yo kunu independent aka jura le kabringan na independent soto fobi ko ya fo nyami la kumo kono nyinan namu independent independent atallulu ni woro njangoti kunun nimbi fato bije bake fanna jamala bari bitu ko nga mem fo kumoto dron se ala tentu dron to momin nga nyindo fananga mabe se ala tentu bake fonse independent jama mabe Gambia Cairo se sabati jang nyo moyo ani nyo kano se sabati jang hanne atranko political difference betar laje bar wo manyan na kan divide bari mo kilimo la mun told
yo QTV fundila tabang ka mol katande QTV fon je nyaadi ne
QTV fanam bal tentula bal jayla bayral be doku kendola yalon atol layin doku atele ka kibaro janjande abuka dam moyro drone na bari ni QTV muta drone ila kibari jama kana ikaje screen auto ika kumul moy wala la fahamo ka waradina na danta diamo drone na ika radio drone moy bari ni kaje screen o fananto woke la fahamo nyin warandi bake ila jeri fengo nyin tole anila moyri fengo oto mbal tentula drone ka dual ning alla Mohamed Dia fo QTV nyin ala sa yiriwa ta nyato ni nyato kanal be so sabu nyi mala sima ba jata kenda ani hadiye firimola
abaraka bake mbading ila kubo nyata bake mbeten lambe jayla Ade Drame and my colleagues at the studio, back to you now.
Karsisi, they're live coming to us from Brikama, and say big thanks to both Babu Karsisi and Aji Bintu Drame, who've done a great job. Now, just before we went to Babu Karsisi, their CD, we heard Bibi Dabo, and also saying, I'm sure he won't mind me mentioning him in the vein of a veteran politician. He himself talked about having to come back into the political fray, but he had some interesting things to say there. Any things that nuggets that you picked out from his?
Yeah, I mean, thanks so much. I don't know if he's veteran now because still he's back in the politics. Yeah, he talks about investment. Very little investment was done.
Sure.
I mean, Bibi was in government.
Yeah, great.
I remember fully. He was one time at Commercial Development Bank. I think we don't want to, open up the can of worms.
Sure.
But the Commercial Development Bank, what they have done, we've seen it's terrible. We've seen the cooperative in the Gambia in those days. It's supposed to help the farmers, but the cooperative actually did not deliver. He talked about the government that was there, the Jammeh government. They took the power behind the people, but he's serving that government. Whether it is a day or an hour or a minute, he was there. So for me, I would take that issue with him, especially on another platform. But in a nutshell, it's a time to reflect. We need to reflect well, and then definitely the foot soldiers. We talked about the small and others, but our poor grandfathers, the Jumbo Bojang, the Famara Wassa, the Sanjali Bojang, and others. All these people took it upon themselves to go out there and claim ownership. Ownership that they did not understand at the time. This is the problem. They do not understand what independence really means. And on the shoulders of those they are riding on, actually do not inform them to understand what really independence meant. And I think that's why we find ourselves here in a situation where we are struggling in everything. In Gambia today, we are struggling in everything. Poor electricity, poor internet service, poor road network. I mean, if you imagine the amount of food that we are importing into this country, if you go to the market, I tell you, you do your shopping for your cooking, I can tell you 80% of every commodity that you bought is imported in this country.
Yeah.
That's serious.
I was horrified.
You call it an independent country.
I was horrified when we went to a rice field.
The fundamental thing we must take ownership of is to feel that this is our country and we need to do something about it, to fix it now.
Sure.
It is not about tomorrow. It is now. We must revisit history and understand what went wrong in order for it to happen. Based on the fact that no taxation without representation. We have our parliamentarians in parliament, but what they're interested is the political privilege. The ministers. What is the difference between a sitting minister today and in the colonial time? They are driven in dark Mercedes Benzes. In 4x4s, and they break the traffic however they like. They don't sit and wait for anybody. And I tell you what, they don't go to our local market. I tell you what, they don't go to our schools, their kids. I tell you what, they don't go to our clinics. Fundamental thinking has to take place.
Sure. Thank you for that, Sidi. Ali Cisse, if I could come to you, just in wrapping up, as we're getting towards the close of the program, we've talked about the ills, and Sidi has kind of given us a pointer of some of the things, and that was a challenge I wanted to throw to yourself and to Mr. Mboj, because anybody watching can say, yes, people can come on these programs and they can talk about what's wrong, what needs to be fixed, and how are they going to contribute to fixing it. If I could come to you first of all.
For me, what needs to be fixed has to start at the top, the leadership.
Sure.
For me, that's where the problem is. I mean, like Bibi said in that video, I mean, the drop in the quality of leadership has been a problem for this country. I mean, unless and until that is fixed, we're not going anywhere, because what this country needs at the moment is a visionary leadership. A leader that sees nothing but the interests of the country. A leader that sees nothing but to alleviate the suffering of the people. A leader that sees nothing but to ensure that, you know, the lives and lives of the people are better. Because like Sidi rightly mentioned, you go to the market, 80% of what you will buy is all imported, and because of that we have these high prices of basic commodities.
Sure.
And now you compare that to the earnings of the people. It's by no means the same. It's not the same as we speak, and that's why it is very important that the government is seen, you know, very proactive in ensuring that, you know, the life and livelihood of people are better. People, especially civil servants, are well paid in order to help fight corruption. As we said, corruption is very rampant in the government. Why? Because most of these people are earning very low. And then if you are earning, for example, less than 15,000 and people are saying you're building a mansion, then there's a question mark.
Sure. How
are you able to arrest them to build a mansion? So the leadership should really, you know, take that stance and then show example that they truly mean what they're advocating for.
Sure.
Like it is the case everywhere, especially in the Gambia. Before they are voted in, they will say all sort of things. They will give you all sort of promises. And once they get into that place, I mean, it's a different ball game. I mean, they see it differently. And like we are seeing right now, millions of, you know, it's being spent on political affairs, when actually there are pending issues, more pressing issues affecting the people that needs to be addressed. The issue of rent.
Sure.
It's a problem now. I mean, people are complaining about the issue of rent, high rent rate in the country.
Sure.
So all these things is a concern. Imagine a day like today, Independence Day, we still have these women out there trying to make ends meet. That shows you that, yes, definitely this country has a long way to go.
Mr. Mboj, problems exist. What are the solutions? And Ali has touched on it without even mentioning it. Things like parliamentarians voting 54 point whatever million loan for themselves to build houses. But we don't want to be among the complaining classes, and so we want to be the solutionists, to quote from one of our colleagues who used to work here. What are the solutions?
Absolutely. Well, the first time round, when we thought that there was a problem, we used to have military revolutions. I think the second time round, there's a problem. I think we need to have a civil revolution.
Sure.
I think it's going to come from a social revolution, really, that's going to change things. Right now, what do we face? I don't need to retread the ground, the poverty, all that's going on. But what are the prospects? Now, there's a promise rising from the east. What are we going to do with the China thing? That's the future. Economically, how can they help? I mean, we understand from some people that perhaps during Jawara's time, in fact, we are told on the 22nd of July, 1994, he had a meeting, as it were, scheduled with the Chinese ambassador. There was something called the Gateway Project to start little industries. We know that we need to go into that. So how are we going to play this game, this East-West game? There's climate change around. What do we do around that? The poverty levels. And the economy is not doing well. We've got a youth bulge. We all know that.
Sure.
How can we absorb that, you know, into productive use rather than having crime go up? Because when you have all of this youth, there is no work, then you know that these things will happen. So these are some of the things that we are faced now. So we have to hold our governments to account. Our institutions are weak, very, very easy to just come and pervert. In many ways. Sure. And we have been shown with the Jana Commission and with the TRRC, we tend to be too compliant, as it were, in our own subjugation, in our own oppression. So many times the President Jammeh would demand anything, I would give it to him. If I'm not brave I can never be free. Sure. Only lawful orders are binding. Exactly. And this is how we can help ourselves and strengthen the institutions. Just because you're the president, you cannot tell me to break the rules.
So, a final word each from you, 30 seconds each. Because time is our enemy. CD, first of all to you.
We don't want to be the complaining. The reality is we must have honesty in politics and we must have critical thinkers.
Sure.
What I see in the Gambia, many of our politicians are dishonest to the core.
Aleo.
Well, for me, just for people to change their mindset and see nothing but the country first, and let's put aside our tribal differences and then focus on developing the country.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, all of you, and brings us really nicely to the end. But I think I can't close without saying something about the fact that there was a reason why we did what we did today. We wanted to use this as an opportunity to actually ask critical questions. And of course, in 2.5 or 3 hours, you're not going to answer all those critical questions. But we wanted to start the ball rolling by prodding people to say, don't just use this as a kind of, as the Lagos people will say, for jollification. Use it for reflection. Use it to think about the words of the national anthem. Have we lived up to those words? Will we ever live up to those words? And should we try to live up to those words of the national anthem? So to the viewers who phoned in, thank you for calling in. To our people who are out on the streets, Ajibintu Drame and Babukar Sise, huge thanks to you. To the production team, Lasana Tunkara, Francis Boahend, we have here in the studio. I could go through names and names upon names, but I want to say, if you're watching QTV, don't forget, tune in today at 3:30. There's an entertainment show. There'll be music, there'll be drama, there'll be comedy live on QTV. Watch it. And once again, to those of you who've stayed with us for the duration of this program, thank you for watching, and thank you for tuning in to this special on QTV on Independence Day. And we wanted it to be slightly different. If I can just go around and ask panel just to say their final goodbyes. Ali Usise.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ade. It was a pleasure to be here. And then once again, we hope this day will really help change the country moving forward. Thank you.
CD.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ade. And thank you, everybody. And thank you to the viewers. Fundamentally, I think we must rethink. The gentleman said we have to reset the button, but we have to rethink. And rethinking is taking ownership of this country. And taking ownership is to be in charge.
Sure. Thank you. Mr. Ambush.
Yes, well, happy Independence Day. But as Alice Walker once put it, to make Independence Day meaningful, it takes every day.
Absolutely. And on that thought, it's time to close. And once again, you've been watching QTV, you've been watching our Independence Reflection. Thank you for watching. And don't forget, 3:30 live program here on QTV. Thank you. Goodbye.
Dialogue has served as a safe space for young people in the country, discussing issues ranging from environment, technology, politics, as well as gender issues. In 2021, we are ready to do more. And to be part of this amazing journey, join us every Thursday at 7 p.m. and every Sunday for the repeat. Anything for the youth without the youth is definitely